Welcome back to the Black Pearl. Marine Tech Mike here, and this is pretty exciting. Today we are chopping a hole in this boat, which is something we teach at Marine Tech. So our new technicians, the electricians, the electronics, mechanics, everybody in our industry needs to know how to cut holes in boats. Not always this big though. You know, if you're mounting that new bigger chart plotter, multifunction display, cut a hole. Electricians drilling holes to run all of our new wires. Hydronic heating, heater hoses, and the blower units. We just did that. We've got, you name it, it happens. Air furnaces, air conditioners, holes, chopping holes. So this, the Black Pearl, is a new hatch. It looks like a butterfly, but it's not. It's actually, it opens, once we get it mounted, it opens this way. We got a template. We got some favorite tools of mine. We got carbide. We've got to cut through probably 3/8 of an inch of fiberglass and a plywood substrate. And so carbide, oh yeah, that'll do it. We got vibrating tools. We got jigsaws, sawzalls, whatever it takes. We're installing this hatch today. Late October. The rainy season is upon us, but today and tomorrow they're predicting no rain. So it'll be a good time to get this mounted. Gonna let a ton of light in down below. Denny always wanted one of these. It was on his list to build. And so, yeah, let's go down below and I'll talk about how this whole thing started, and then we'll get this hole chopped in here. It's gonna be fun. Well, this is how boat projects go. The goal after our beautiful summer Alaska trip was I had these temporary, everybody joked temporary permanent because they've been there for 2 years, wires that just were draped on the ceiling and taped up out of the way to put in these new LED lights. And so I was experimenting with different LED lights to see if I had the color spectrum that I liked, if I had the profile that I liked, so on. And these I really do feel were the best. So it was time to hide the wires. That's what electricians do. And well, in order to hide the wires, because of the sides of the boat, the overhead, the only way you can really get the wires is to take the ceiling down. And so the ceiling in Black Pearl was this old 3/4 inch tongue and groove, and it's a super heavy. I probably removed 150 to 200 pounds of wood and replaced it, because as I was pulling down the overhead, I'm like, oh, there was only about 1/8 of an inch of insulation in the overhead. The hull, it's a double hull. It's a fiberglass hull, and then it's got closed cell foam, and then it's got another layer of fiberglass in there. So on everything from waterline up. So awesome. It's super warm. It doesn't sweat. It's great. But the overhead was lacking. So of course, what do you do? Well, we're going to hide all of these new wires for the lights. We might as well decide to put in some more insulation. So I found that if I went to these thinner panels, which have basically the same look, they got the little wainscoting grooves in them, that I could go to a full inch of insulation and new ceiling tile, and then I could just carve in the insulation where my wires need to go. Excellent. What a good idea, Mike. So yeah, I'm going to do that. So you start tearing down the ceiling. Turns out every bay is a different width. 1/4 inch here, plus or minus. You know, it's crazy. And then the edges are all on an angle, and so all of a sudden there goes a few weeks of my life this fall. And then the next thing was, back about 6 years ago, they were crushing boats, as they do. You've seen, there's a video I put out about crushing boats. Well, they were crushing, I think it was a Hans Christian or a Tayenya, I don't know, but it had sat on the hard and filled with water, and it was just destroyed. And we saved a few cabinet doors and some things that we could. But I told the yard, I said, man, look at that beautiful hatch. They're like, you want it, Beemer? Yeah, I want it. And so they took a sawzall or a chainsaw, who knows, I wasn't there, and they chopped that hatch right out of the top of that boat. I came by the next day, they threw it in the back of my pickup truck. And it laid in my shop for, like I said, probably 6 years. And Denny always wanted to have that hatch in here. So that's where that hatch that I showed you upstairs came from. Well, since I'm tearing out all of the ceiling and insulating, I'm thinking to myself, self, when are you actually going to put the hatch in? The smart thing would be, well, while the ceiling's all down, because you put the hatch in, you're going to have to trim all the ceiling panels and the insulation. So why not? Yeah, let's do it now. So there went a couple more weeks of my life down in my workshop, and the first thing I had to do was strip off all the old varnish and, of course, sand and fill some old holes and plug stuff, and you know the drill. And then 7 or 8 coats of varnish later, we had it looking beautiful. And then Denny went to great lengths on Black Pearl. Everything on deck is bronze. I mean, everything. Well, the hatch came with these stainless steel bars in it. And I'm like, So I called down to Alaska Copper and Brass, and sure enough, I could still buy silica bronze 3/8 solid round stock. Perfect. I needed 20 feet. Turns out I had to buy 2 12-foot sticks. They put it on a giant semi, trucked it up to Anacortes for a small fortune. But the tradition lives on, all bronze. So that brings you up to speed today of where we're at before we cut that giant hole. It's been a lot of work, 6 weeks probably, and we had to get it ready to cut and put the hatch in. So now we can put the hatch in, seal it down, and start working on trim and finishing out the ceiling. And then maybe by Thanksgiving, I'll actually have these lights mounted and be able to turn them on and not have wires, just exposed wiring hanging all over the place. So, thanks for watching. Let's go upstairs, fire up a saw, and cut some holes in this boat. Well, it wasn't exactly that easy as just go up and cut a hole in the boat, because the deck beams that ran through Black Pearl, originally installed back in the 70s, everything on the boat was really well built. And so it started out with cutting out that section of beam where the hatch was going to be. And also then subsequently I had to build a couple of matching oak beams to run fore and aft. And I don't know if you call those a carlon. I don't know what the exact shipwright term is, but I needed to span and tie in the beam that I cut to the 2 beams fore and aft with these new pieces of oak to match, and then I could actually, get the thing in. And turns out I tried a lot of tools. I thought the beam would pop right out of there, but holy crow, glued and screwed, and it fought me the whole way. Lots of tools. End up having to cut every single fastener, and a few blades on my little vibrating tool and crowbars, you can see, and all that stuff. And then lots of gluing and screwing and clamping. It's nice to have the Marine Tech Center there for little projects on rainy, cold winter December days to get those beams built. And then we could get up on deck with the patterns. And actually, so I made a pattern that I knew for sure the hatch would drop in, and one down below, so I could mark it out and get ready to drill, because it's one of those things where you want to make sure you've done it right the first time and not mess up. I mean, it's not that we can't fix something, but when you're cutting a hole in the right in the main salon of the boat, that's a big deal. Well, here's the deck cut out. We got kiwi grip and the glass and the plywood, and for being like 50 years old, it's amazing. We've got no delamination, super thick. She's in excellent shape. Probably ought to go another 50 years, as long as I get that hatch sealed up so it doesn't leak. Well, it felt so good to get that hole cut and the hatch to fit, and then I realized there was still a lot of work to be done. And so at that point, before I couldn't just glue and screw it in. I was against a deadline of a couple days without rain, but I had to drive all those new beams in that we built, and then and clamp and glue and screw and fit, and there goes a few more hours of your life. But basically, get that whole structure ready, and then once we got it to that point, then we could drop the hatch in, and it got screwed in from the bottom, going up and through, and so we're hopeful it doesn't leak. We'll keep an eye on it. That's the idea, anyways, to preserve the boat. I mean, it is right in the main salon, so if there is a drip, we'll know straight away. But super excited about the amount of light that it lets in, and how at the end of the day it really just kind of looked like it was always meant to be there. So these kind of projects are super fun. Being the electrical instructor, mechanical, the stuff that we usually do, just to be able to do a little woodworking and stuff that looks good, was a great feeling. So really, really excited about how this project is turning out. Well, last step was to run a few screws in from the top down, make sure everything was locked in and super solid. Boat's really well built, so I'm not worried about the structural integrity of this, having the hatch in here. It's probably stronger with all the reinforcements we did and the hatch that we added. And then we made the weather window really nice. We roughed up got the paint off from the fiberglass and grabbed a little bit of sealant, and you squeeze that all out, drop the hatch in, and it was a good feeling knowing that we could continue with the ceiling work and actually get back to the reason the project started was to start drilling the holes, running wires, and mounting interior lighting. But a monumental task right here, and great feeling when we dropped the hatch in. Well, 15 minutes into the video, here we are. This was the important part. This is our objective, was to have all those ceiling tiles out and then to drill holes through the deck beams and get our wiring run for the new LED lights. I just chose to run some 16 gauge red black. There was no yellow available when I bought it. This was wire for these lights, as opposed to a sheathed duplex, because I wanted to keep it as small as possible, just so that it's easier to hide and move around, and very low current and zero chances of chafe anywhere up here once we put insulation over the wiring. And so, but yeah, we got the holes drilled and got the wires area to put in, and then I marked out on the ceiling where I wanted to put each LED light, so that we put 4 in the main salon and 4 in the galley, and maybe end up being 5 in the galley. But so nice to have some nice dimmable lights. After we had the wire runs established, then we had to take the ceiling tiles, and because it's only a 1/4 inch thick, it's like a masonite. I was worried about it drooping over time. And so they're 15 inches wide, kind of at the most, but I didn't know. And so I really wanted to make sure that this was going to work. So what I chose to do was to scratch it up really well, because it had a hard waxy surface, and I wanted to make sure I used construction adhesive, and wanted to make sure that it adhered really well. So I took that, after I scratched it up really well, I did construction adhesive, primarily in the middle, a little bit around the edges, took a real fine trowel, smoothed it out, and then sandwiched the foam insulation to it because the foam is really rigid. And at the end, it ended up being 1.25 inches thick, 1 inch of foam, 1/4 inch of that beadboard. And then I put a bunch of weight on it, let it cure overnight, and then I'd start installing the ceiling tiles. And it was really rewarding. I think it was a really good move. It's warmer, better system to have in the overhead of the boat. Okay, so burying the wires for the lights obviously turned into this huge project along with mounting the hatch. So now that we got the hatch in, we needed to finish up ceiling tiles. And ceiling tiles turned out to be quite a bit of a bigger deal than I was anticipating, like every boat project. So we got rid of that tiny thin foam and ended up going with a full inch of this closed cell, this pink stuff, which is great. And then 1/4 inch wainscoting with 3 coats of paint on it. And then I had to rabbet out the edge. This is where it fastens in so you don't drill up through the deck. And then locate all of the original trim rings for the deck prisms, which let in a bunch of light. And then this is the new access port for where the new LED light goes. And then behind the scenes, we took the router and we cut out little grooves where the wiring is going to go. Even though it's 1/16 of an inch or 16 gauge wire, it's thin. You know, I didn't want the ceiling to have a little unevenness to it. And so there was a few other little details that we had to do, of course, before we could mount these up. One of which is we have a hanging light, which is really beautiful, and it needed a backer block to screw into, so we got the backer block in. And then for the LED lights, we're using these little Wago connectors, and these things are amazing. They take 20 amps, they pass the pull test, the works, and so these LED light fixtures that I purchased are inexpensive ones, you know, $6, but I've got a $6 light that's got 50,000 hours on it in my lab. And so I just bought some extras, but if I ever need to pull them down and replace them, instead of using a butt splice or a crimp cap, these little Wagos are really good for small wires, and they also allow you just to open up the connector and pull the light out and change it out. So we're getting very close to wrapping this project up. It'll be a little bit more trim around the hatch. It's too late today to work on that, but we'll think about that tomorrow with our coffee and get this project wrapped up. Made it sound simple, you know, cut the tile, fit the tile, paint the tile, 3 coats, glue it to the foam, cut the foam, put in trim rings, da-da-da. And then a bunch of pre-drilling and a bunch of screws, and then, you know, all overhead work, and then all of a sudden, yes, it was worth it. The light works, and it's amazing. Well, the ceiling's all done. Of course, like every other project, we was hoping to be done by Thanksgiving, and now it just dipped into 2024 because we ended up taking everything off of the walls and putting a coat of varnish on the trim boards, new paint, because, you know, the ceiling was just a little different height up here. But trim boards, you know, all takes time. So that's all done, and we are now just in the final stages of doing the galley, because in order to get the wires through for the forward lights, of course they came through this galley area here, so we're doing these 4 bays as well. And we're going to repaint the galley and do some other fixing up as well. But we'll leave the video right here with the completion of the big hatch and cutting the giant hole, and new insulation, new wires. And then coming up soon, we're going to talk about retrofitting digital switching, the C-Zone system on old boats, because that is super cool. So thanks for watching.